I enforced basic boundaries on my daughter's sleepover. I have 2 kids. My daughter Anna is 17 and my stepson Noah is 14. Noah's mom died a few years back and he's been living with me full-time since. He's not like some weird loner kid or anything, but he really doesn't like when people mess with his stuff or invade his space. When he gets really overwhelmed, he just kind of shuts down completely and won't talk to anyone for a while. Anya's the total opposite. She's super outgoing, always has friends over, constantly on her phone with someone. Last Thursday, she asked if she could have 4 friends sleep over on Saturday night. I said, yeah, sure. But I gave her 2 rules. First, her friends needed to stay out of Noah's room completely. They're kind of loud, and in the past they've crowded him and made him uncomfortable. Second, keep the noise down after 11 so the rest of us could actually sleep. That's it. 2 basic rules that any normal person should be able to follow. Saturday comes around and her friends show up around 6. They're making dinner, blasting music, laughing super loud in the kitchen. Totally fine. I was downstairs watching TV and honestly wasn't paying much attention. I figured they were 17 years old. I didn't need to babysit them every 5 minutes. Around 10, I decided to go upstairs and just do a quick check to make sure everything was cool before I went to bed. I walk past Anna's room and it's empty. Weird. I hear voices coming from down the hall and my stomach just drops because I immediately know where they are. I open Noah's door and all 5 of them are in there. 2 of the girls are literally sitting on his bed like they own the place. One of them has his sketchbook open and is flipping through it while the others are giggling. Another girl is going through the stuff on his desk, picking up his headphones and looking at his drawings pinned to the wall. They're all laughing in a way that made my skin crawl like they thought the whole thing was hilarious. Noah was sitting on the floor in the corner near his closet. He wasn't saying anything. He wasn't moving, but I could see tears in his eyes and his hands were shaking a little. I said his name twice and he didn't even look at me. That's when I knew he'd completely shut down. I told all the girls to get out of the room right now. Anna started to say something, but I cut her off and told her I was calling all of their parents immediately. She looked at me like I just told her I was burning her phone. One of her friends tried to laugh it off and said they were just talking to him, but I didn't care. I pointed at the door and told them to go downstairs and wait in the living room. Anna followed me out into the hallway and started saying I was being ridiculous and embarrassing her in front of her friends. I told her I gave her 2 rules and she couldn't even follow one of them. She said they were just trying to include Noah and be nice. I asked her if he looked included to her. She didn't have an answer for that. I went back into Noah's room and sat on the floor next to him. I didn't try to make him talk or anything. I just told him I was sorry and that they were leaving. After about 15 minutes, he finally said he wanted to be alone for a while. I told him that was fine and left him there with his door closed. I went downstairs and called every single parent. I explained what happened and said they needed to come pick up their kids. Anna stood there the whole time with her arms crossed, staring at me like I was the worst person alive. Her friends were all sitting on the couch looking at their phones and whispering to each other. Within 40 minutes, all of them were gone. The second the last one left, Anna absolutely lost it. She started yelling about how I humiliated her and ruined her night and how her friends were never going to talk to her again. I told her to go to her room and that we'd talk about it in the morning when she calmed down. She slammed her door so hard a picture frame fell off the wall in the hallway. I checked on Noah again around 11 Mar. He was in bed with his headphones on, staring at the ceiling. I asked if he was okay and he just shrugged. I told him I loved him and left him alone. The next morning, Anna still wouldn't talk to me. She came downstairs, grabbed a granola bar, and went back to her room without saying a word. I tried knocking on her door around noon to talk, but she told me to go away. Noah spent most of the day in his room too, but he came down for dinner and seemed a little better. He didn't bring up what happened, and neither did I, if you'd like. I can tailor this to a different tone, more formal, more casual, adjust for specific ages or family dynamics, or help you format it for publication or a script. I can also add additional sections like scene breaks, dialogue tags, or stage directions as needed. Story. My wife's mother gave her grandkids iPads, jewelry, and cash, except my daughter. Not really family, she said. My wife said nothing. Then my 9-year-old slid a box across the table and said, "Grandma, Dad told me to give this to you if you ever ignored me again." She opened it and screamed. Chapter 1. The Empty Seat at the Table. Sunday lunch at my mother-in-law's house used to be tradition before the lies, before the hierarchy, before she made it clear my daughter didn't belong. We sat around the long mahogany table, her prized possession where every fork was polished, every chair assigned like a royal court. There were 6 grandkids there that day, all laughing, all excited, all holding sleek boxes with little bows. My daughter, Ava, 9 years old, wearing her favorite sunflower dress, sat quietly. No bow, no box, no gift. My wife's mother, Sharon, smiled sweetly as she handed out iPads, silver bracelets, and envelopes thick with cash. She skipped over Ava like she wasn't even there. No explanation, no apology, just a tight-lipped, "Hi, sweetie," and then moved on to the next child. I waited. Surely someone would say something. My wife glanced at me, looked away, said nothing, and I knew this wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. The woman who had once kissed Ava's forehead in the hospital now acted like she didn't exist. Like our daughter was some outsider who didn't deserve her attention, let alone a gift. Because Ava wasn't blood. She was mine from a previous marriage. But she had called this woman Grandma for 5 years. And now she just sat there, her legs swinging under the table, her tiny hands clutching the edge of her chair. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to call out every single person who saw what happened and stayed silent. But instead, I looked at Ava. She looked up at me, then slowly reached into her backpack, pulled out a small wooden box, the one I gave her that morning, and slid it silently across the table. "Grandma," she said calmly, "Dad told me to give this to you if you ever ignored me again." Sharon frowned, confused. "What is this, honey?" Ava didn't answer. She just looked down. Sharon opened the box and screamed. Chapter 2, The Box of Truth. The scream was sharp, not from pain, but from pure, unmistakable fear. Sharon's face contorted as her trembling hands dropped the box. It hit the floor with a dull clack, its contents spilling beneath the table. Ava sat still, calm. She'd known exactly what was coming. I stood slowly, leaned down, and picked up the papers that had fallen out, placing them neatly in front of Sharon, whose eyes were now wide with recognition. She wasn't screaming because of what was in the box. She was screaming because she thought that box was buried 10 years ago. Inside was a DNA report, a birth certificate, and a notarized, time-stamped, handwritten letter from Sharon's late husband. A letter she had destroyed. Or so she thought. I spoke clearly, each word slicing through the table like a blade. "Your husband wrote this before he died. He confessed everything. The affair, the child born out of wedlock, and how he regretted never telling his real granddaughter the truth." Everyone froze. Sharon's perfect little world, her lies, her judgments, her hierarchy of who's real family and who's not, had just cracked down the middle. Because Ava was his only biological grandchild. The rest, the pampered, gift-wrapped grandchildren she paraded around and spoiled every Sunday, were not. And Sharon knew it. She had known for years, and she'd buried it, literally. But I found it in a safety deposit box under his dog's name, no less. He left it there for her to one day know the truth and for Ava to be seen. Sharon's voice shook. That's fake. You're manipulating. It's not the lab you used to get tested for your recent insurance policy." "Yeah, I asked for a copy. Turns out you've got a grandchild with 99.96% DNA match. Her name is Ava." I turned to my wife, who looked like a ghost. Her mouth parted, breath shallow. "You let your mother ignore her. You sat there and watched this happen. And now you'll never sit at this table again?" Ava didn't say a word. She just stood up, walked over, and took one of the iPads off the stack Sharon had wrapped for the real grandkids. No one stopped her. And no one saw the tear that slid down Sharon's cheek. Not out of guilt, but out of fear of what was coming next, because this wasn't over. Chapter 3, The Bloodline Shift. By the time dessert was served, no one touched it. The room was split physically and emotionally. Sharon sat slumped in her chair, her hands clenched around the edges of the tablecloth like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Her daughter, my wife, stared at the floor, silently, begging for the ground to swallow her whole. The cousins who had once jeered at Ava, whispering that she wasn't really one of them, now stared at her in stunned silence. But Ava stood tall next to me, clutching the iPad, not because she wanted it, but because it now felt like proof, not of value, but of vindication. Then I pulled out one more envelope. This one wasn't dramatic. No seals, no hidden letters, just a copy of the updated will from Sharon's late husband. The man who everyone claimed had left everything to Sharon and her perfect children. Before he died, your husband made one last change, I said, sliding the envelope across the table. It's legally binding. Signed and filed. You might want to read the highlighted section. Sharon didn't open it right away. Her hands hovered above it like it was a live wire. So I read it for her. In the event of my death, the trust shall prioritize education and legacy funds to any biological grandchildren confirmed via DNA. Specifically, Ava Lynn Carter, daughter of Evelyn, my daughter from my early relationship with Linda Marks, shall be the primary heir to the legacy fund totaling $1.3 million. The room gasped. Sharon finally opened the document, eyes darting across the page, lips trembling as she saw the notary stamps, the attorney's signature, and his handwriting in the margin. This is my final wish. Don't let Ava suffer for our mistakes. My wife whispered. You knew. Sharon didn't answer because the truth was she always knew. And now all the golden grandchildren she lavished gifts on. They'd get college funds, cars, maybe even small shares. But Ava was the one with the legacy. Not because of the money, but because her existence could no longer be denied. Not with DNA, not with history, not with truth. Then Ava did something no one expected. She walked over to Sharon, set the iPad on the table, and said softly, I don't want this. I just wanted you to see me. She turned and walked to the door. Silence followed her like a shadow. But as I held the door open, I looked back at them. The entire family now reeling, ashamed and rethinking every snide comment, every exclusion, every cruel silence. This isn't revenge, I told them. This is just truth. You buried it. And Ava unburied herself. And with that, we left. Ava didn't cry. She held my hand, squeezed once, and said, Thanks for believing me, Dad. And that was everything. Chapter 4. The Silence After the Storm. The ride home was quiet. Not the heavy kind of quiet. Not the kind that makes your chest feel tight, but the kind that feels like calm after a storm. Ava sat in the back seat, watching the trees blur past the window, clutching the little origami bird I'd folded for her before we left. She hadn't said a word since we walked out of Sharon's house. She didn't need to. She'd already spoken louder than any of them ever had. The first apology came that night. My wife, Ava's stepmother, knocked on my apartment door around 9 p.m. Mascara-smudged voice. She's just old. She doesn't mean it like that, she whispered. I didn't invite her in. Old isn't an excuse for cruelty, I said. And silence isn't forgiveness. She tried again. You blindsided her. No, she blindsided a 9-year-old child. For years, she left in silence, and I locked the door behind her. That night, I tucked Ava into bed. She didn't ask for a bedtime story. Instead, she asked, Do you think she'll ever mean sorry? I paused. Maybe, but it won't matter if she doesn't because you, Ava, you're not waiting on her anymore. Then came the letters. The next few days, cards began arriving. One from a cousin. I didn't know the whole story. I'm sorry I left you out. Can I make it up to you? One from Sharon's sister. We thought we were protecting Mom, but we were just helping her stay blind. And finally, a short, unsigned letter. No return address, just shaky cursive on soft beige paper. I made a mistake. I saw his eyes in yours, and it scared me. Because I knew the truth. But the truth scared me more than the lie I built. You deserve better than I ever gave you. I hope one day you forgive the coward I was. Ava stared at it for a long time. Then asked, Can we keep it? Why? Because it means she knew. She really did know, and it hurt her. The last party invitation weeks passed. We were invited to a cousin's birthday party. I asked Ava if she wanted to go. She nodded. We showed up this time together. No one ignored her. No one skipped her name in the gift pile. And when Sharon saw her, she froze. Her hands trembled. Her mouth opened slightly. She looked like she was about to cry. Ava walked up to her, held out a small flower she'd picked from outside, and said, This is for him. Grandpa, I know he loved me. Sharon's knees buckled slightly. She took the flower and for once didn't speak, not because she had nothing to say, but because for the first time in her life, she knew she wasn't the main character anymore. Chapter 5. The Box That Changed Everything. The room was quiet. All the children had unwrapped their gifts. Shiny tablets, silver necklaces, thick envelopes of crisp cash, all except Ava. She sat there patiently watching, waiting. Then Sharon, my wife's mother, looked right through her. Not even a glance. No words, no smile. Just moved on to the next grandchild like Ava didn't exist again. But this time, Ava didn't look sad. She looked prepared. She reached into her tiny pink purse, pulled out a small velvet-covered box no bigger than a jewelry case, and slid it across the table with both hands. "Grandma," she said gently, "Dad told me to give this to you if you ever ignored me again." Everyone paused. The table went still. Sharon looked annoyed. "What is this?" "You'll see," Ava said softly. She clicked open the box and screamed. Inside was a photograph and a key, not just any photo. It was a framed image of Ava at age 3, cradled in the arms of my late father, Harold, Ava's real grandfather. The man Sharon never considered real family. They were on the porch of my old home. Ava smiling, Harold grinning, his eyes squinting in the sunlight as if he already knew this moment would one day matter. Taped beneath the photo was a handwritten note. "This is the only granddaughter I've ever known. The only one I'd leave my name to under it." A small brass key to his personal safe. And beneath the key, a folded legal document, an amendment to Harold's will, signed and notarized a month before his death, leaving his entire remaining inheritance, a sizable trust fund, and the deed to his lakefront cabin to Ava. Sharon's hand trembled. This isn't real." My wife grabbed the paper, eyes widening. "Mom, it's real." "We didn't tell you before," I said, standing slowly, "because Ava didn't need money to know she was loved. But now she deserves to know that her grandfather saw her, even when his own daughter's mother didn't." Sharon looked like the blood had drained from her face. The collapse of control. The party ended quickly. Relatives began whispering. Some even hugged Ava goodbye with misty eyes. Sharon. She couldn't even speak. For once, the matriarch had no power, no spin, no excuse. And the rest of the family saw it now too. How small cruelty looks in the light of truth. Later that night, back home, Ava placed the photo on her shelf next to her books. "He really loved me, didn't he?" I knelt beside her. "Yes, sweetheart. He saw your heart before anyone else did." "Do you think she ever will?" I paused, then answered honestly. "Maybe, but by then you'll already have everything she can't give." Ava smiled, like love. Exactly. Epilogue, the porch light. 6 months later, the lake was still. Pine trees bowed with summer breeze, and Ava stood barefoot on the wooden deck of the cabin. Her cabin now the deed was official, the trust fund secure. But this was the real inheritance? The porch, the scent of old cedar, the sound of birds and wind chimes, and the memory of a man who saw her before anyone else did. She stepped through the screen door into the warm stillness of the cabin. The air was filled with his scent. Old cologne, tobacco pipe, and pinewood polish, untouched, preserved, safe. On the fireplace mantel was a small envelope, yellowed, handwritten for Ava. "When you're ready," she opened it with trembling fingers. "My sweet girl, if you're reading this, then I kept my promise. You've probably been told you're not family more times than I'd like. I'm sorry for that. But blood doesn't define love. Time does. And I saw the way you held my hand, the way you asked about the stars, the way you told me I was your favorite grandpa. That was more than enough. So this cabin is yours now. But it's more than a house. It's your proof that you matter, that you are loved, that someone saw you, truly saw you, and chose you. Love always, Grandpa Harold. A legacy of love." Ava sat on the rocking chair out front, letter pressed to her chest. The sun began to set across the lake, painting the water gold. Behind her, I stood quietly, watching her read it again. Not a single tear fell from her eyes because in that moment she wasn't broken. She was whole, seen, loved, chosen. Final image, the porch light. As the night fell, Ava stood up and turned on the old porch light. It glowed like a beacon over the lake. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to because sometimes revenge doesn't look like ruin. Sometimes it looks like healing. Was this revenge perfectly justified, or should the storm have raged harder? Drop your verdict below. I read every single one. Hit like if you crave justice and share this story with someone who needs its fire. Subscribe to Revenge Exoised because here betrayals don't sleep. They hunt their owners. Every shadow hides a reckoning. Every mask breaks and every betrayal is answered. Stay sharp. Stay unbroken. Stay tuned.